is the running back. Play action. And Manning's going to heave one. There's a flag. Beckham on one hand.
Gravity is a very important aspect of football that is used multiple times on every play. Kickers must account for the force of gravity to see how high they must kick the ball before it starts being dragged down in order to make the field goal. Quarterbacks also have to do this when they make a throw to see how much speed the ball should have and height in order to make it to the receiver. It is also applied when players jump. They must time their jump so that they can be at their highest point when they make a catch. If they jump too early, the force of gravity will be bringing them down already and they won't be able to make it. It is also the force that keeps the players and everything else on the ground. Impulse force of an object is the amount of force applied to an object over a certain amount of time. In football, using impulse force could be very important in reducing the amount of injuries. On hits like these, players have built up so much momentum and the time of contact is very short, resulting in a ton of force on players, which leads to injuries such as concussions and broken bones. If the NFL were to increase the size of helmets and pads, it would decrease the impulse force because it would take longer for the collision to occur, and more pads would make it a softer one. Similar to the crash barrier lab, increasing the size of an object results in a lower impulse force. Impulse force can also be applied when catching a ball. While it may not look like it on TV, quarterbacks actually throw the ball almost 60 miles an hour. If a receiver were to use more padded gloves and stick their arms out and cradle the ball towards their body when catching a pass, they would be much more likely to make the catch because the ball would have less force and less speed due to a decreased collision time. Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration, is applied in football. Many times, much smaller players are able to overpower big players due to this. When a small player does it, is because of their acceleration. However, depending on the weight difference, they must have more or less acceleration. This play is a good example of Newton's second law. As you can see, number 19 in white is able to have a big hit on number 55 in black. However, number 19 is actually 40 pounds less than him. He was able to do this because he had an increased momentum leading into the hit, but number 55 was side shuffling and didn't have any acceleration. The NFL and NCAA actually had to move kickoffs forward 10 yards to discourage kick returns. This is because on kick returns, players have the whole field to build up their momentum and acceleration, so there were many injuries that occurred. With the new rule, players have less time to build up momentum, so they hit players with less force, making it safer. Punts are also very dangerous because players run around 50 yards gaining momentum without being stopped before they make a hit. Also, as you can see, the players that are being hit usually haven't started running yet, so when they get hit with a lot of force, they are prone to injury. Friction is a force used between almost every object in football. When a player is running, there is friction between his foot and the ground. This not only allows the player to run without sliding, but make cuts and spins to get by a defender. On catches, there is friction between the player's hand and the ball. This allows them to get a grip and catch it. On throws, an important use of friction is the friction between a quarterback's hand and the ball. This is what creates a spiral and torque, which we will talk about later. When players are pushed over and they slide, friction brings them to a stop. And when making a tackle, there is friction between the two players, which allows the defender to grab him and bring him to the ground. Air resistance is a force all players must account for during a game. Along with gravity, air resistance brings the ball to the ground when it is in the air due to reducing the velocity. Depending on how hard the ball is thrown, there is a different forces of air resistance. The football is shaped like a torpedo to allow it to cut through the air with less air resistance than another shape like a soccer ball. When the ball is spinning, it experiences less air resistance than a ball that is wobbly. This is why quarterbacks aim to throw a spiral. Kickers are unable to kick it in a spiral motion, so when they kick it, it is being dragged down quicker than a throw due to air resistance. They make up for it by kicking it higher than a quarterback would aim to throw it. Newton's first law states that an object in motion will stay in motion, and an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by another force. This is apparent in football because when a ball is placed on the ground before it is kicked, it will not move until it is kicked. And after it is in the air, the force that acts on it is gravity and air resistance, but if those forces didn't act, it would continue to fly in the air. Also, on these plays here, the players are running and they are never touched by anyone, so there is no force to bring them down, so that's why they continue to run. Torque is anything that causes another object to spin. In football, players frequently spin to get by a defender, and this actually generates speed. Torque and speed are directly related, so the more rotations, the more speed. This is the reason spirals are effective, because as the ball spins, it travels faster. Newton's third law is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In every action of football, this law is applied. On catches, the ball hits the receiver's hand with a certain number of newtons, and the hand hits back on the ball with negative that number. Also, this is true when two players collide. If someone runs into someone else with 500 newtons, they will also be hit with negative 500 newtons, and they will just be more likely to stay on their feet if they have more acceleration.